Stories from the Growing Years by Arleta Richardson. Chapter 11. A Day to Praise.
Why don't we thank God for our food after we eat instead of before?
Alma wanted to know. I couldn't think of any reason except that we'd always done it that way, so I waited for Len to answer. Do you think that would be a good idea? He asked. Alma nodded.
Then you'd know whether you liked it or not before you said thank you. We laughed at her reasoning,
I said to Sarah Jane.
But she had a point there. We don't start the day by thanking God for what's going to happen. We wait until night and thank Him that we made it through.
That's true. And then we just thank Him for what we liked. I wonder what would happen if we turned it around.
I was soon to find out. One morning, as I prayed for God's blessing on the day, I ventured to praise Him for all that would occur before it ended.
It's a good thing I did,
I told Len that evening.
I certainly wouldn't have been inclined to thank Him for all of it tonight.
The day had been stormy, both inside and out. A sudden squall had canceled our plans to go berry picking.
I guess we'll just stay in,
Sarah Jane said when I called her.
I have plenty to do around the house.
I have too, but I was looking forward to being able to send the children off to play with Jessica and Sam and just watch them from a distance.
What's the matter? Are you getting tired of the whys?
No,
I replied grimly.
I'm tired of the why nots. Alma will not take no for an answer. I'm glad she has a mind of her own, but I wish it didn't always have to oppose mine.
When I hung up the telephone and turned around, I discovered that Alma had made good progress toward eating the cookie dough I had just mixed.
For goodness sake,
I scolded.
I should think you were old enough to know better than that. Now I have to make more if the rest of the family is to have any cookies. I'm sorry. I just intended to take one bite, but it tasted so good, I forgot to stop.
She wandered over to the window and looked out.
There isn't a whole lot to do around here. Will we go out if it stops raining? It depends on what time it is,
I replied.
If you want something to do, you can pick up Claire's toys and put them away. He can do that,
she objected.
If he's old enough to throw them around, he's old enough to put them away. I'll remember those words of wisdom when something of yours needs to be picked up,
I told her.
Mothers are supposed to do that, she said. I'll do it for my child when I have one. You are digging a hole for yourself, young lady. You'd better find something to do before I give you more than a suggestion.
I was relieved when Sarah Jane called back after dinner.
It looks like it could be clearing up. We'll be over in a little while.
I put Clarabelle in the buggy after her bath and pushed her out on the porch. We would be able to see the buggy from the berry patch, and I was sure she would sleep soundly through the afternoon.
The grass will still be wet,
I told the children.
Put on some old clothes to play out there.
I found an old skirt and pair of shoes that had flapping soles and a few buttons missing. Sarah Jane must have had the same idea, for she appeared in a pair of barn boots and an old jacket.
We look like something straight out of Godey's Ladies' Book, she remarked. Something they wouldn't have let in.
That's all right,
I said cheerfully.
That's one of the advantages of living way out here. People don't just casually pass by or stop in.
The sun was warm on our backs and we worked steadily for some time. 2 large baskets were full when we stopped to rest a minute.
It seems to me that the berries are thicker this year,
Sarah Jane said.
We're going to have to get more containers.
You know what this means for our future, don't you?
I asked.
Something has to be done with all of these.
I know,
Sarah Jane replied.
That's why I'm eating as many as I can now. There's a limit to how many raspberry pies, cobblers, and shortcakes I can foist off on my family. Do you remember the delicious raspberry vinegar your ma used to make?
Yes, but I don't know how she made it. I'll have to ask her. We could have enough to last us through the winter.
The girls came running over to join us as we sat on a relatively dry log in the sun.
If you want to eat, go pick them off the bushes,
Sarah Jane told them. She eyed the 2 girls critically.
You look like a couple of orphans. If anyone should come by, we'll pretend that we don't know you.
We don't look much better ourselves,
I said.
My skirt is wet clear to my knees, and you have scratches all over your arms. We're a pretty scruffy lot.
A screech from the nearby bushes brought us to our feet.
Alma has her hair caught,
Jessica yelled.
She won't stand still so I can untangle it. You're pulling it, Alma cried. Can't you get it out without yanking so hard?
We went to the rescue, but Alma's long, fine hair was hopelessly enmeshed in the briars. After working for several minutes, we gave up.
Run up to the house, Jessica, and get the scissors from the sewing machine,
Sarah Jane said.
We'll have to cut it out.
This brought howls of protest from Alma.
I don't want my hair cut. I'll look like Claire and Sam if you cut my hair off. We don't plan to skin you,
I told her.
I'll only cut enough to get you out of the bushes. Now, I suggest that you stand still instead of dancing around and making it worse.
Jessica returned with the scissors and a piece of vital information.
Lilac has her nose in the baby buggy. She's just looking. She didn't lick the baby or anything. At least I don't think she did.
I galloped toward the house, leaving Sarah Jane to take care of the barbering. Lilac had wandered back toward the gate by the time I arrived, and Clarabelle was still asleep. I pushed the buggy up to the door and placed the rocking chair in front of it, then raced back to the berry patch.
I didn't see either one of the boys,
I panted.
I should think Claire could keep that cow out of the yard. She is the nosiest animal I've ever seen. If there's one change in the landscape, she has to check it out.
You'll have to admit she's worth her feed,
Sarah Jane pointed out.
She gives you the richest milk and the best calves in the county.
I suppose so,
I agreed reluctantly.
She also gives me the worst headaches.
Alma was trying to pull her hair around so she could see how much had been cut off.
No one is even going to notice it,
Jessica reassured her.
Your other hair will cover it up. You wouldn't have lost that much if you had stood still like I told you to. It wouldn't have been caught in the first place if you hadn't told me to get the berries on the back of the bush,
Alma retorted.
I noticed you didn't stick your head in there. You don't have to do everything I tell you,
Jessica said primly.
I just suggested it.
All right,
Sarah Jane intervened.
Let's not have a big fuss about it. Why don't you go back up and keep an eye on the baby while we finish here? Her mama can trim her hair evenly when she washes it.
The girls left and we returned to the berries. I squinted up at the sun.
It's getting late. I should be thinking about supper pretty soon. What are you having tonight?
I have chicken simmering on the stove. We'll probably have noodles or dumplings, whichever I have time to fix. And raspberries. Lots and lots of raspberries.
That sounds good,
I said.
We'll likely have leftovers. At least I did the baking yesterday. They can always eat bread and butter.
Alma came running back from the yard.
Papa's coming, she called. He's bringing Claire and Sam, and they're sopping wet.
What a surprise,
Sarah Jane said.
Oh, dear,
I moaned.
What is Len doing home this early, or is it later than I think?
Len soon appeared in the berry patch.
I found the boys down by the pond having a water fight, he said, so I brought them home.
His eye fell on the heaping baskets.
You have a nice bunch of berries there. Are you almost finished with your picking today?
Is it getting late?
I asked.
Do you want me to stop?
Well, I thought you might want to start supper pretty soon.
He cleared his voice and looked sheepish.
Especially since I invited company.
Oh, Len! You didn't! What time are they coming?
As a matter of fact, they're on their way right now. There wasn't much I could do about it. They haven't seen you since you left school, and I couldn't very well tell them that they couldn't see you now.
Left school? Who in the world is it?
Len appeared to be in a state between despair and impending hysteria. He didn't look at me directly.
Russ and Clarice Bradley,
he answered.
My mouth dropped open.
Leonard Williams!
I wailed.
You'd better be making this up!
I gazed down at my soggy skirt that stuck to my muddy shoes.
They can't see me like this.
You have been neater, I guess, Len admitted, but I like you just the way you are. You look fine to me. If looks could kill, you and your children would have joined the ranks of the widowed and fatherless right then and there, Sarah Jane told me later.
I felt like dumping the whole basket of berries on his head, I agreed. And I was ready to lay into you too when you suggested that you'd better be getting home.
You'd better stay, Sarah Jane, Leonard said. I told Thomas to come over here for dinner. They're old friends of his and yours, too. Oh, well, Sarah Jane shrugged resignedly. There's a chance they won't recognize either one of us if we rush by fast enough. I'll take the children home with me and clean them up and then come back with the chicken. Hurry before they get here. Alas, there was to be no such reprieve. Before we could reach the house, an automobile chugged through the gate and 4 grimy little urchins gathered around it. I stopped on the path.
I can't do it. I'm going back and stay in the woods until they're gone. Look at Clarice. She's dressed in white. And my children will be the first to put a muddy hand on her skirt. I can't do it, Sarah Jane.
She grabbed my arm. Look at it this way, Mabel. Life doesn't get any worse than this. We'll walk right up there just as though we didn't know how terrible we look and greet our old 2 school friends. We certainly won't disappoint Clarice. She always did think we were out of our natural element in town.
You could talk, I muttered. One of those old school friends didn't ask you to marry him. I'm so embarrassed I could die.
You haven't time. Come on.
Somehow the next few minutes were gotten through and Sarah Jane left with the 4 children. As quickly as I could, I cleaned myself up and comforted a howling Clarabelle. When I returned to the kitchen, Clarice was sitting quietly in the rocking chair looking around the big rooms. "Can I do anything to help you?" she asked.
Nothing but go home,
I thought, but I answered as calmly as I could.
No, thank you. Sarah Jane will be right back and we'll have supper ready soon.
Clarice watched as I picked up toys and books, transferred berries to the pantry, and found an empty basket.
I'm going out to get vegetables, I told her. Would you like to come?
I glanced at her white dress and dainty shoes.
On the other hand, maybe you'd better wait here.
As I picked corn and beans and tomatoes, I pictured the home Clarice had come from. As wife of the bank president, she had no worries or cares, I thought. Someone else did her cleaning and cooking. There were no children to interrupt her day, and unexpected company would be greeted in an elegant parlor by an elegantly dressed lady. What must she be thinking of the simple log house that we lived in? And her place could have been mine. Angrily, I yanked beans from the vines and bent to pick some lettuce.
Mabel,
Clarice was calling from the doorway. The baby is crying. What should I do? Cover your ears, I thought.
I'll be right there,
I answered.
She'll be all right.
At that moment, Thomas and Sarah Jane drove in with 4 clean children.
Thank goodness,
I thought.
Thomas can help Len entertain them while I get supper.
As always, Sarah Jane brought a measure of sanity in with her. We worked together easily, and Alma and Jessica set the table without fussing. Clarice had gone out with the men to walk down to the river's edge. The girls ran outside to join the others, and we quickly finished putting the supper on the table.
I'll go and call them,
Sarah Jane said. At the doorway, she stopped and clapped her hand over her mouth.
Oh no, Mabel, come and see.
I ran to the door and watched in disbelief as the scene unfolded before our eyes. Clarice was standing with the others by the fence, and ambling quietly up behind her was Lilac. Before I could shout to Len, the cow poked her nose over the rail and nudged Clarice gently on the shoulder. The shriek that Clarice let out when she turned her head and found the huge face next to hers could have shattered windows in the next county. I buried my face in my hands.
Sarah Jane, tell me that this day is just a nightmare.
Oh, it's real enough, she gasped. I haven't witnessed anything like this since the day that goat chased you into Len's arms. Come on, we can't let her know we saw that. They'll be in without my calling them.
We rushed back to the stove and composed ourselves as best we could. Clarice entered with the others looking pale and shaken, but she sat down at the table without saying anything. Miraculously, none of the children said anything either, although they never took their eyes off her during supper. When the Bradleys departed a short time later, we sank down in our chairs and laughed until our sides ached.
I didn't know anybody could yell that loud,
Jessica remarked.
I didn't either,
Alma agreed.
Lilac laid her ears back and galloped out to pasture. She probably won't come back to that fence for a week. That will be a pleasure, I said. I'm sorry Clarice had such a fright, but something good came out of this visit.
Everyone looked at me expectantly, and I leaned back in my chair and gazed around the room.
I've found out that I wouldn't trade my wonderful home and family and friends for anything that Clarice Bradley has or ever will have. God has allowed me to be right where I want to be.
End of chapter 11. End of Stories from the Growing Years.